Good morning. This is Beale from Gartner here in London, and welcome to this morning's 60-minute webinar on business continuity management. It's a pleasure speaking with this group again. I've run a couple of other webinars earlier this year, so this is the third one of this calendar year. So pleasure to be back. If any of you joined my previous webinars, I ran one in April on emerging risks and in June on taking the right risks to grow. I presume I'm doing something right because the IRM were keen to have me back, and do another one. So welcome to this one. Going to be talking about business continuity management. I'll take you through the areas I'm going to cover in a moment. But just to remind you, this is a 60-minute webinar. There's a Q&A box, so if you do have a question, do pop your question into that question box you should see on your screen. And we'll try and answer them as we go through. I can't promise to answer everybody. We have quite a large group on the call this morning, but I'll try and get to those which are more likely to be of general interest to the group. So please do send in your questions. And also, in that spirit, I've got 3 questions I'm going to be asking you as a group to give us a sense of, in particular parts of the session, where you currently are in terms of business continuity planning. So let me move forward to this is how we're going to spend the time today. That's okay. Yeah. So three areas. I want to provide an overview of business continuity. I talk about why it's important, and then focusing on one particular area, looking at tabletop exercises and how to set up a great tabletop exercise to exercise the plan and, of course, exercise the team. How can we talk about this? Well, I work for Gartner. I've been here at CB before we were acquired by Gartner for almost 8 years now, working with our audit and risk clients across EMEA region. So we have about 320 or so clients, and we're working with the leaders of audit, leaders of risk in very large companies, across sectors, across geographies within the European region. And I'm part of a team that does the same thing across the globe. So there's an equivalent team in Asia, in Australia, and in North America. Before that, I was the Director of Risk and Audit myself at 3 different companies, and part of my role, certainly my last 2 companies, was business continuity planning. So I have some practical experience from prior roles, but also our best practice research is what I'm going to be leveraging for the majority of what we're going to be talking about this morning. So let's okay. Already got one question in, which is a technical question. We can share the slides afterwards if you're not able to see the slides or they're not advancing for some reason. You've got a technical problem at your end. Then we will tell you at the end how you can get access to the slides and indeed the replay through the IRM. All right. So let me start with a definition of business continuity planning. Now my screen's now what's happening here? Oh. Okay. Right. Sorry about this. There seems to be a connectivity problem here. Right. Here we are. Oh. Right. Now we're working. So a definition. In the blue box at the top, definition of business continuity management. I'm actually going to read it out because I think there's a lot of important points in here. It's a process, first of all. It's a holistic management process. So there's a life cycle, and we'll talk about that life cycle. So it's an ongoing activity. It's not one-time activity which is done and then you never need to come back to it. So a holistic management process identifies potential threats to an organization and the impacts of those threats. If those threats are realized or crystallized, what the impacts might be, And also, so first of all is that risk identification and risk assessment, but secondly, a framework for building resilience, and we'll talk about the prevention as well as the response elements of business continuity planning. And then the effective response, safeguarding the interests of stakeholders, reputation, brand, and value-creating activities. So a number of key elements in that definition there. If I was going to word it differently, I'd say there's an element which is proactively planning for the predictable. I mean, you know in your organization there will be problems. You might lose a key member of staff. You might have system downtime. You might have, from time to time, poor product quality if you're a manufacturing environment. So planning for the predictable or the expected, if you like, with a mindset of it's a when, not an if type of situation. But also an important element of business continuity management is reactively coping with the unexpected. So when there is a surprise incident, event, or accident or something like that, internally or externally, you are able to respond to the unexpected as well as responding to the expected, sort of the typical type of events. So good definition there, I think, but I think I would add or provide some extra color around that. And what are we trying to protect? Again, we mentioned holistic in that definition, a number of things at the bottom there. Clearly, the technology, employees, the safety of and health of employees and indeed customers or contractors that are on site is critical. Business continuity planning also including kind of the ecosystem, if you like, of your suppliers, your third parties, your business partners, outsourced providers, and the question I'm going to raise is your fourth parties as well. Facilities, so buildings, offices, fixed assets, if you like, records, of course, and your systems and data. A couple of things I'd add to this, and this is an element of where sometimes we bump up against, well, that's someone else's responsibility, but either as part of your BCM activity or together with ERM and obviously operational management, thinking about that risk reduction, where can we in our business reduce the risk of incidents occurring. So BCM may focus more on detection of incidents, recovery of those, and getting back to business as usual, and ERM might focus more on the prevention side. But definitely there needs to be a connection between the two of you. So let's make sure you're focused on that risk reduction, obviously in an effective and cost-efficient way. But particularly on that, I'd focus on single points of failure. Have you anywhere where you have a particular concentration risk or a single point of failure? Two different phrases for a very similar concept. So if you think about products, are you very dependent on a single product in your organization? Or a brand? Is there one brand in your portfolio that is critical? So if there was a disruption to that brand or a damage to its reputation, how would you recover from that type of incident? Single points of failure in terms of customers, if you're very dependent on a single customer, which you might be, for example, if you're providing services to a government in a particular territory. Markets, considering today's volatile macro environment with trade barriers and tariffs being introduced and changed. So if you're particularly dependent on a particular market or suppliers, business partners, and indeed key people. So thinking holistically like that about single points of failure and risk reduction is really important. I want now just to ask a question of you as a group. I want to ask what's covered by your business continuity plan. So hopefully on your screen you'll see a simple question from me. So what is covered by your BCM plan? Crisis management, IT disaster recovery, supply chain resilience, bigger question of business recovery or other activities. And these are, choose as many as are applicable to you in your organization. Just be interested to know how broad your coverage of BCM is in your organization. Okay, I'm going to keep keep the questions open for a few more seconds. So please do respond, and we'll see where we come up. Okay, there's a few coming through. Crisis management, it's frequent. IT disaster recovery, business recovery. No one's selected. I'm going to close it now. Oh yes, someone has now just selected supply chain. Okay, so the majority of you are focused on crisis management, IT disaster recovery, and a smaller number on business recovery and supply chain resilience. Okay, thank you for that. That gives us a sense of where we are. Okay, let me move us on. The different components of a BCM program, and I should say at this point, once you get access to this material, we've written these slides, these pages in the deck in a way that you could cut and paste these if you were building a case for starting a BCM program at your organization, if you're at that situation, or if you're looking to extend, expand, or embed. You could take these slides and use them as part of a presentation to your management colleagues, your peer group, or some sort of risk or audit committee that you need to get support from. So once you have access to the slides, we'd be very happy, as long as we get the attribution at the bottom of the page, for you to reuse these. So we typically see, and this is why I asked the question just now, these 4 fundamental components in a business continuity program. So the first one, I'm going to start at the bottom. Crisis or emergency management. The thing has happened. Some incident is taking place now, and as part of BCM, you need some crisis response. So we need to detect the incident has occurred, be focused on the containment of that, and the appropriate response, which might include emergency services supporting us. It will certainly include communication if it's a significant event. That would include staff, customers, regulators if you're in a regulated industry, and potentially the media, depending on who you are and kind of the scale or nature of the incident. Needing to manage the incident in a strong and clear way, taking the lead, if you like, operating on the front foot. And then clearly embedded in there or implied in there is protecting people, health and safety of customers, employees, and anybody else that's in the vicinity. So that crisis emergency management and communication is a key element in there, of course. The impact of an incident can be modified or exacerbated by the caliber of your communication to the media. I'm going to go next one up, supply chain or supplier risk. And this is the risk of one of your key suppliers in a very broadest sense. They may be traditional suppliers of making a raw material or component for you. They might be sort of system-based suppliers where they're providing technology support or data for you. They may indeed be visible to your customers. So delivering a service directly to your customers, and it may either be clear it's provided by a third party or sort of embedded in your overall service, but actually you're dependent on that third party to deliver that element of your customer service. A couple of things I'd just highlight here. I'm not going to read out everything that's on the page. You can read that for yourself. I just want to elaborate and highlight a couple of points. There's a variety of things that could happen when your supplier in your supply chain. Questions about product quality. If there's any variability in the product quality, how would you cope with that type of incident? Product availability. If there's disruption in the supply chain, so the service or product is no longer available or not available in the volume or in the timescales you're looking for. And a factor perhaps behind that is the financial stability of the supplier. And we have this debate with a lot of our clients as to whether you're monitoring the financial viability of your suppliers as well as their product availability and product quality. And another dimension here, I touched on this just earlier, is the fourth party. Many of your suppliers will in turn themselves subcontract to another organization, and how far down that chain do you need to understand their approach to business continuity and the potential impact upon you of any disruption of their service. And a dimension to that which we are hearing about quite a lot in recent weeks and months this year is that some of your third parties may each of them in turn subcontract to the same fourth party, so you end up with a concentration risk. where you'll become very dependent on that fourth party. And it is, to be fair, pretty hard to figure out or to understand that you do have that concentration risk, but very important that you do so. Moving up, IT disaster recovery. This may be another area where you get that same concentration risk in a fourth party. You've definitely got to include your third-party providers here, whether they're in the supply chain, whether they're providing services for you because you've outsourced activities, or they're delivering services direct to your customers. And then right at the top, the actual recovery of your services and your activity, whether that's kind of the buildings, the infrastructure, the activity, the service to your customers. And of course, embedded within that, you may be asking people during that recovery period to work in different roles or to work at different locations, or indeed for some people if they can work at home. So there's a variety of activities and elements that you'd have in that top box, the recovery and continuity piece. If I was going to summarize this, I think there's elements which prevent, protect and prepare would be a good catchphrase or note for you to make, and then respond, recover, review would be a second tranche or second element there. Another way of approaching the sort of key components. So let me just say that again: prevent, protect, prepare, respond, recover, review. So those are the key components, and we see, as I mentioned on the first slide, this being very much a process. So there is a life cycle to this, and these are the 6 components you can see laid out in a cycle or a circle here. Again, I'm not going to read out everything that's on the page, but just briefly, we're talking at 1 o'clock there, top right, the risk assessment. Let's understand what are the key components of our business, whether they are at the corporate head office, whether they're at regional or distributed offices or locations, or whether they are external to us because they are a supplier or a key third party. So let's understand the risk we're facing, the vulnerable parts of our organization, and the prioritizations, as there will be some parts of your organization which are or systems or processes which are absolutely critical to get back up and working. You can think of a dealing system in a bank or a booking system for an airline, for example. Seconds count in those sorts of activities. But there'll be other processes where, to be honest, a 4-hour, 8-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour recovery is perfectly adequate. They are not so time critical. So an assessment of those different elements is absolutely critical. That part leads on to that business impact analysis. So let's understand the importance of the activity, consider it from financial sort of costs or revenue, consider it from customer service and other dimensions, and assessing the speed of recovery that's necessary for each of those different elements and activities and processes. And then the third part is, well, we need some sort of decision, if you like, aligned to our risk appetite. So how quickly do we need to respond to different types of incidents? How soon do we need to be back up and working? So there's a prioritization there, and that can be quite tough, because a lot of operational managers will say, yes, my function is absolutely critical. We've got to be back up and working within a minute or 5 minutes or 30 minutes. And it can be a tough discussion to say, well, no, you are important, of course, but you are not critical. The most critical area we need to get back up and working first is this part of the business, and that's where we're going to focus. And your part of the business will get you back up in 12 hours or 24 hours or maybe 48 hours. Difficult conversations to have with some managers who don't realise they are not quite as important, the most important thing in the organisation. Moving around to the left-hand side, number 4, actually building the plan. So if we've had that assessment, that imagery, if you like, of what our processes are. We've thought about the vulnerabilities, the exposure, the risks we could face. We've gone through that prioritization, so we know what we want to start recovering in what sort of timescales. That's what need to be written down there now. One of the things that we often come up against here is an appetite in the BCM team to write something which is hugely detailed and very prescriptive. Some elements might need to be very detailed like that, but in many cases the precise incident and the impact of that incident actually requires you to have less detail, some prioritization, some key objectives, some timescales, but you need a skilled, motivated and empowered team to operate within some ground rules or within some framework without trying to write down in your BCM recovery manual the detailed instructions for every possible type of disaster scenario. So, debate we often have is how much is enough when you're writing that disaster recovery plan, that business continuity, business recovery plan. So a good question to have in your mind, certainly one to take away from this morning, is do we need to write as much detail, or can we have that framework, key principles, broad objectives, prioritizations agreed, and as long as we have a skilled, motivated and empowered team, they're going to make the right decisions and get things back up and working. So detail where it's needed, but not necessarily right through that recovery plan. The fifth one there, absolutely exercising. Two reasons to do exercises on a regular basis. First, that's to make sure that the plan itself is fit for purpose. It does cover the things that we need. It does address the actions that need to be taken. But secondly, the other part of doing the exercises is, of course, to train and educate the team. So people know what to do. They are used to working together and making decisions in quite a stressful and perhaps volatile, changing environment. So exercising to confirm the plan is good and the people are ready. And then that leads us naturally back to you operate in a world or an organisation where things are changing in a variety of ways. Whether you're launching new products, changing your organizations, upgrading systems, changing suppliers, etc., etc., etc. So therefore you need to come back and restart that whole cycle. So there's a process that you need to go through, a life cycle or to this. And to be honest, given the pace of change that most of the organizations are undergoing that we work with, this needs to be a regular process. So it's not just once a year, probably more often than that. You're going around and making sure that you do understand how the business now works and the prioritization of the organization and the priority areas that need to be recovered at what sort of timescales. All right. So with that as a background, what are the top threats? Oh, sorry, I've got some additional comments here. I meant to say I've said a couple of these. So let me just highlight these. Yeah, absolutely, building in resilience. Think about that prevention element as well as the recovery and restoration element. Okay, a couple of questions coming in. I'll get to those. Yeah, get to those in a second. Let me just highlight these points. Single point of failure. Be very conscious of that, because there are other drivers for going towards single supplier, just-in-time processing, so we're not having any stock in inventory, for example. Single preferred supplier, because we get great service, good price, innovation and improvements to the product or service because we're a preferred customer. That fourth-party supply dependence that I mentioned and potential concentration risk, and the prioritization, absolutely key. There are some things which are much more critical to be back up and working than others. So question about what's the difference between BCM and ERM? Well, hopefully you're working well together. ERM is more around that identifying those key risks. How do we measure how can we define some KRIs against our risk appetite and monitor the status of those risks and whether we have an effective set of controls designed against them, or whether we need to change or improve those controls to manage those risks against the risk appetite that we've set, our risk tolerance that we've defined. Business continuity typically is that something has now happened of a serious nature, and so therefore the prevention piece has not worked well, and something has occurred, and then we need to put in place or invoke the business continuity disciplines, planning, and activities that needs to help us to contain the incident, to continue business as usual in the unaffected parts of the business, but then recover and restore the parts of the business that have been impacted by the incident or the event. The role of the board, another question that's come through. The role of the board is to be, I would say, active supporters of the need for business continuity, supporters and challengers of management as to whether they are doing enough to understand what management is doing across those 6 elements, those 6 pieces of the life cycle. So assessing, prioritization, documenting, testing, and refreshing. So the board won't be directly involved. They would expect management to have some resources devoted to this to make sure that there is an effective business continuity philosophy, process, planning in place that's kept up to date. The team is ready to go. It's tested in an exercise, and so if there are at any time an incident that occurs somewhere in the organisation, it can be invoked and deployed, and we will be back up and working in the expected timescales. So I'd expect the board to be more about a challenger, to question whether management is doing sufficient, being effective and efficient in their responses and approach to business continuity planning. So let's move on in terms of what are the most frequently cited threats. You can see here the threats that are most frequently reported to us that are on the agenda for risk managers, business continuity managers. Probably not surprising to you. You can see at the top there, fire, natural catastrophes, and supplier failure are the top 3. Clearly, just to say a few words around these, fire or something like that could be at your site or could be a nearby site or location that affects you, either because it spreads or you're part of the cordoned off. You have to evacuate, for example, because of the fire next door, or the road outside is affected by an explosion or something like that, and you can no longer have access to your location. So your building might be fine, but you're affected by a nearby fire, explosion, or something like that. Secondly, natural catastrophes, hurricanes, storms, fires, whatever, those types of things, natural events occurring. We've got some statistics coming up as to how frequently they occur and how big they are. But you need to consider, I think, quite broadly here, whether that natural catastrophe could affect you or any of your key markets. So your customers may be impacted and unable to buy your products or services. Could it affect the suppliers, your key suppliers, access to raw materials, or any of your own offices, which may be in multiple jurisdictions or territories around the world? So whether it's sales and marketing offices, call centres, IT centres, R&D locations, logistics, whatever it might be, any of your key locations around the world, could they be affected by a natural catastrophe? And then the third one I'm going to talk about is that about supplier failure. And some areas here where again, the boundary between ERM and operational management and BCM can become a bit blurred. How involved are you in terms of monitoring, not just the quality of the product or availability of product from your key suppliers, but their financial viability, for example? Are they becoming financially distressed, and how might that affect you as a key customer? And we do see some of our clients providing support to their suppliers, a variety of ways of providing support to key suppliers, because they're certainly entering into a more synergistic relationship with a key supplier, expecting the supplier to be innovative and sharing the benefits of that innovation with you as a key customer. So monitoring and supporting, whether that's directly part of your responsibility of BCM, but it's certainly something that needs to be on yours or the ERM or operational management's agenda. So those are the most typical, the top 10 threats that we hear about from our global client network. And interestingly, the types of incidents where there exists a business continuity plan listed on this page. So again, we see fire, number 2, yeah, absolutely. Severe weather is the number 4 there. Cyber is the top one. So many teams have got a cyber security response plan for a breach or a disruption of service. And that's because increasingly we're seeing teams move from the if consideration to the when. There is an expectation that your systems will be breached, your security will be breached, and therefore a much not reducing the focus on or reducing the effort on prevention, and your firewalls, etc., and your security access controls, but the realization that they are likely to be breached, and therefore, firstly, how do we detect a breach has occurred? How do we then contain it, and how do we then recover and respond to that breach? So a switch of thinking to a when, not an if. And the other thing I'd mention, which kind of affects or is relevant to all three of these, is awareness about small incidents. So it may not be a major incident, but if are you tracking smaller incidents occurring around the organization? Because if you're starting to see smaller incidents occurring frequently, you may be increasingly vulnerable to a larger incident of that same nature occurring in the organization. Similarly, near misses. Are you alert to near misses where something disastrous nearly went wrong, but we either detected it and prevented it, or it just didn't naturally conflate to a bigger event? So repeated small incidents, near misses, are those on your radar screen? Are you aware of them around your organization? Are you listening for them, learning from them, and refreshing your business continuity philosophy and thinking as a result of that? Okay, now I want to ask you a second question. And let me see. Okay, who owns your business continuity plan? So I'm assuming many of you are in the BCM teams, maybe even running the BCM team, responsible for it in your organization. So who do you report up to? Who does the BCM team report to? Do you report to ERM, risk management? Do you report to the CFO, the CIO, so the Chief Information Officer, General Counsel is another option, or another executive? So I'm going to keep this open for about 30 seconds. I'm going to see what the answers are. Okay. ERM is the biggest winner so far. Now other is caught up. I wonder what other would be. Okay. All right, we're getting a mixture, some of all. So ERM is no, it's not. It was the largest. Now ERM and another executive are the biggest. Okay, I might have to come back to you and ask you who the other one is. That's interesting. We don't often see others than those four. Okay, interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, so let me show you who we normally see across our global network. The CFO is the most frequent owner of business continuity management, followed by the CRO or Chief Risk Officer. They're the biggest or most frequently occurring too. I don't think there's a single best answer for who you should report to. I think there's some characteristics which could influence who the right person is. You need someone who is senior enough to give you credibility, visibility, to be able to influence their peer groups at the executive committee. So seniority is definitely an important thing. As a person, they need to be supportive and active. They need to get it. Why is BCM important? And be an active supporter of BCM. So if you had a choice, should it be the Chief Risk Officer or the CIO or the CFO? It could be either, as long as they have a broad corporate mindset. They are senior enough, they're active and engaged. That's why we're relaxed about where you would report to, as long as you're having the support, the involvement, the commitment, the visibility that you need to get the resources you need and get the action that you need to take. An interesting question that does come up is during an incident, of course, you need the management team to be doing two things. You need some of your management team to be responding to the incident, and you need some of your management team to be running the business as usual. So a clarity of roles in an incident to make sure that people are very clear at the certainly at the senior management level, which of those is their role, which is their primary role. Because if you have confusion if everybody's involved in the incident and everybody's trying to run the business, you're likely to have a very suboptimal performance on both of those areas. So part of the preparation of the plan, the tabletop exercise, the testing and training of the team is being very clear that those are the people that are going to deal with the incident. And the team might be slightly different depending on exactly what the incident is, but those are the people that are responsible for responding to the incident, and other managers will be focused on running the business as usual, or as close to as usual as possible. Next question we asked, and I think this is the last piece in this first section, is what standards do you use as a foundation or as a checkpoint for developing your BCM approach? And ISO is the most frequent. Some do not use a standard, but ISO is definitely the most frequent standard that's used, but by no means a majority. You can see there 32%, so a third of people are very deliberately choosing to align themselves with an ISO standard. All right, let me move on to the next. And again, for many of you who are experienced BCM professionals, some of this next section will be familiar in terms of broad concepts, but we've got some data in here which, as I mentioned before, if you were looking to use this session to build your own business case, to reinforce the messages you've been using internally, or even to help you kickstart your BCM approach, then some of these statistics could well be relevant for you. So recent incidents, here's just a few we've listed on here, variety, different sectors, different types of incidents, different locations geographically. So Hurricane Harvey, we could update that now with the latest hurricane that's just been impacting Japan over the last few days. So whenever you draw this world map with recent incidents, there always seems to be a hurricane that's just happened in the last few weeks. Heathrow Airport, a couple of years old now, of course, but the system problems at the airport, leaving thousands of passengers stranded. Maersk was in the public domain some months ago now, but a cyber attack that caused some severe problems at that organisation. Toyota, seriously affected by an earthquake, and you can see the bottom in the call-out box at the bottom. Only 22% of business leaders believe their organisation is fully prepared. So the mathematicians amongst you will realise that means 78% are concerned that they're not yet fully prepared. And interestingly, only 16% of organisations have never had to use their business continuity planning. So the vast majority of organisations have had a serious incident where they have had to invoke their business continuity planning. So it does occur, and it does occur quite regularly, and significant incidents do occur around the world of different sizes. So here's some more statistics. On the left-hand side, the number of organisations that have experienced 11 or more disruptions over the previous year has gone up. But you can see between 2015 and 2016, 22% of organisations saying they're experiencing 11 serious disruptions to their organisation in the previous 12 months. And you can see at the bottom, particularly in IT, 60% of organisations serious IT outages. 90% of organisations, when we surveyed them a couple of years ago, 90% of organisations had multiple serious outages every year. On the right-hand side, in terms of natural disasters, you can see the 10-year average is going up. So there are more natural disasters if you do a rolling average compared to the previous years, is going up. So more disasters, more incidents, and then on the next page, they're getting bigger in terms of their financial impact as well. You can see on the left-hand side, data center outages has gone up 38%, the average cost of a data center outage. And natural disasters that cost in billions, you can see on the right-hand side. And somewhat daunting, and again, for those of you that are experienced in business continuity planning, you will have seen numbers like this from a variety of surveys over recent years. how many organizations fail to recover from a major incident. The incident is so big, the time and resources consuming, the market loss in terms of customers moving away, financial impact being very quick. 40% of organizations do never recover from a serious incident. So this is all very, very serious. These numbers are very, very serious. If we then look at the question of the other way around, so what are the benefits of a BCM program? Well, it's a reduction of the impact of those costs. So on the left-hand side, looking again at the data breach, the cost, there is still a cost, even if you have a business continuity plan, because there will be costs of investigation, costs of restitution. There may be costs involved in communicating with clients and customers. There may, in some industries, be some regulatory fines or penalties as well. But the costs are substantially lower for those organizations that have an incident where they also have a BCM program. And you can see the same thing on the right-hand side, that the recovery, the resilience of supply chain is much stronger for those, as you would expect, that have a business continuity planning process in place, in operation. You can see the call-out boxes at the bottom. The speed of recovery is much quicker for an IT outage. So speed of recovery, cost, resilience, all much higher when you have invested in an effective disaster recovery plan. So hopefully that resonates with your own experience and kind of makes sense in terms of scale and nature of those numbers. All right. I want to move on now to the third and final part of the session, the webinar. Okay. Looking at one particular aspect of that cycle, we put 6 elements in that life cycle diagram a few pages ago. Just really wanted to double down and focus on tabletop exercises and some guidance from what we've put together from our research and from working with a number of clients around the world, some guidance on how to set up and run a great tabletop exercise. I'd say there is some investment, certainly in terms of time, that's involved here. So I would just say, before you go down the route of creating and deploying tabletop exercise, and you've already written your business continuity plan, have it independently reviewed, probably within the organization. Have someone else review it who is reasonably knowledgeable, and get them to think about these sorts of questions. Does this make sense, what we're saying in the business continuity plan? Is it actionable? The things that are listed in here, can people take action? Is it clear what action needs to be taken? Is there anything missing or unnecessary in there? Is it too detailed? Is it too prescriptive and will be irrelevant in many incidents, because the incidents will actually be slightly different to what's been used to build the recovery plan? So get a knowledgeable person internally. You could ask us if you wanted to do it that way, but I think you probably need some internal business or organizational knowledge to really do that effectively. Maybe your internal audit team could help out there and cast a review and pressure test the thinking that's gone into the business continuity plan. Okay, but certainly tabletop exercising. In terms of an overview, at the top there, the box at the top, really these are to evaluate the effectiveness of what you've put into your plan. What we have written down, is it comprehensive? Is it going to be effective? Is it going to be efficient? Are we going to get back up and working as quickly as we expect to, based on what we've written down in the recovery plan? Equally important, but not written down here, of course, is the training of the team. And you would expect the team through the exercising to be much more familiar with their roles, the sorts of decisions they're going to have to need to make, types of communication that's going to be necessary, the difficulties of some of the decisions they need to make, because they will probably have incomplete information, which in a good tabletop exercise is also going to be evolving as it would in a real incident. So bottom left, there's a lot of time that's needed to think this through in terms of the scenario. Proportion of time in the planning is very high. You can see we're saying about 60% of the overall time that's invested in a tabletop exercise is at that planning stage. On the right-hand side, there's a number of roles that are needed. I'll explain the 6 key roles in a couple of pages, but clearly identifying the roles and having people nominated or allocated into those roles, and those people knowing exactly what their role is during the exercise. And they have roles to play in the development, the carrying out of the exercise, and then of course the post-exercise review, and what did we learn and what went well. So again, a kind of a life cycle thing here. These are the steps involved. Developing, well, first on the left-hand side, which plans are we going to test, or which parts of our plans are we going to test? You might not want to test the whole thing. You take a particular segment about logistics or call center or customer service, whatever it might be. So taking a particular element of your continuity approach, and what are the outcomes? What are the objectives? What is the point of this test? Are we trying to get something back up and working? Are we trying to be able to communicate with our customers? Are we trying to redeploy employees? What is the purpose of the test? There might be multiple objectives, but it's very clear what are the objectives of this particular exercise. As BCM leaders and staff, definitely working with SMEs to make sure you're really building a great exercise that's going to be sufficiently complex to be realistic and challenging, but not too complex to make it infeasible. Depending on the stage you're at, you will need to, as I say in a few moments, you'll need to build up sophistication or complexity of your exercises as you progress through your life cycle of BCM planning. Drafting the scenario, reviewing it internally with experts and SMEs, perhaps other assurance providers in your organization as well. Kind of, does this make sense? Is it complete enough? Is there a whole story here? Is there clear objectives? Have we got the right people involved? Does the timing make sense? If you're going to evolve the data available to the team that's being exercised, the sort of the info drops that you're going to do during the tabletop exercise, does that make sense? Are you using any live feeds? Are you having role play by external third parties? Kind of, does the whole thing make sense? Then that takes you through to finalization of the details, when and where it's going to take place, who's going to be involved, are you on site, or are you going off site to do this? And then you conduct the exercise. I actually think there's a box that's missing at the end, which is the reviewing of the results of the exercise. What did we learn? What went well? What did not go quite so well? And what do we need to learn and change? How do we revise the planning documents that we've got? What else can we do to improve our business continuity planning? And of course, equally important, have we got the right people in the team? Do we have the right skills? Do we have the right personalities? Do they work well as a team? Were they sufficiently empowered? Were they clear about the objectives and goals? Did they discharge their duties effectively as part of the exercise? Or do we need some different people, either in terms of personalities or skills in the team? So writing a good tabletop exercise, really three things I'd highlight here. The first one, very important, take a crawl, walk, run approach. Don't make it too complicated too early. Build some momentum, test particular, perhaps very, very specific, smaller parts of your continuity philosophy in particular locations with particular teams. Build some credibility, build some knowledge, start to feel confident that the team are working well, the planning has been good, the exercises are good. So shorter, simpler, more narrowly focused, definitely start there, become more complex, involving perhaps multiple locations, multiple teams, etc. As you build some experience and knowledge. Obviously, make the scenarios realistic, depending on where you're located and the teams you have. If you've got a very system-centric organization, you need systems people in there. If logistics is your key thing, you need some logistics people in the recovery team. So have the right people in the team, make the scenarios realistic. So if you're saying this is the situation, people say, yeah, I could see that happening, or something like that happened to us last year. something like that happened to one of our competitors this year. I could see that situation unfolding. That is a realistic scenario that makes sense, that we should really be able to understand, contain, and respond to. And then, as I say, the last point there, be specific in which pieces of your continuity plan, which teams you want to exercise. Okay, 6 roles. First 3 are on here. Players, these are the people who are being exercised, who are being asked to evaluate the situation, to respond, to make decisions, to invoke the recovery plan. These are the guys that are actually taking those decisions and doing that activity. And you need a mix of people. You need to think about functional knowledge, corporate skill, or organizational knowledge. You need to think about personalities, having the right number, not too many. You need to think very carefully about whether you want your chief executive in that team or not. He or she may be a bonus, maybe not, depending on their personalities and their ability to work in a team. Facilitator, someone like you maybe, who's helping to explain where we are, what's the time, how time is evolving in the scenario compared to real time, explaining what this is more information you need, this is now available and known, this has happened, this is the situation, this is the response or impact or outcome of decisions you've previously made. So the facilitator is making it work. Observers, looking at how the team is responding, the decisions that they are making, the impact of those decisions, the speed of those decisions, the way they're communicating internally, externally, etc. So observers, another key role. Typically the observers are pretty busy, so separate people who are making notes, recording actions that are taken, decisions that are made, impacts of those decisions, and making sure there's a complete record kept of who did what, when, and what decisions were made during it. Evaluators may not be involved during the actual exercise, but certainly afterwards. So how did it go? What worked well? What did not work so well? Where do we need to improve? Where were the right decisions made at the right time? Where not, and why? And then finally, and this depends on the complexity of your tabletop exercise, if you have multiple locations or different teams focusing on different aspects, they will need to communicate with each other. Well, the tabletop exercise communicators are the people that carry the communication from one team to another. And for any of you that have done some of these tabletop exercises, that shows very quickly how what I thought was a clear piece of information is interpreted differently by different teams, or what I thought was a very good question is answered in very different ways by different teams as well. So that communication and how easy it is to convey the wrong message or to get information that you didn't expect is very important. So 6 types of roles that you would need in any tabletop exercise. Just to close out this section, some recommendations on tabletop exercises. In some of your organizations, there will be regulatory requirements as to what you need to exercise and how frequently and who needs to be involved, and whether indeed the regulator needs to be involved or just simply informed. So regulatory compliance in terms of your tabletop exercise is key. Thinking about the maturity of your plan, if you're just starting out, as I say, take early steps at the simpler end of the spectrum, that crawl, walk, run. Very much focused on criticality. If you've got a super critical piece of the business, that's the area you should be tabletop testing first, and build up the complexity and the sophistication and the scale and nature of the tabletop exercising as you go through it. Have a number of objectives. What is the point of this exercise? What is it we're trying to see how well and how quickly we can achieve this? Whether it's system uptime, manufacturing restarting, selection of an alternate supplier, whatever it might be. What is it that we need to get it back up and working? So having those objectives very clear, and people need to know before the exercise starts what the objectives are. 4th point, making them realistic and relevant to the people who are going to be taking part in the exercise. and making sure that you're going to exercise all of the elements that you want to exercise in that particular activity. And saying the same thing, I think a slightly different way, don't overwhelm people, don't make it so complex with so much information changing so quickly and so many demands upon them that it just becomes kind of almost impossible to succeed, if you like. I think you need to build up sort of smaller successes and then get much more complex. So that was some walkthrough of what we see in terms of best practice tabletop exercises. And then I'm keeping an eye on the time, got a few minutes left, so I would just want to highlight some overall recommendations and, if you like, key takeaways before I close out. So firstly, as we saw from the second section, BCM is essential. Incidents of a variety of nature occur regularly across the world, impacting organizations of different sizes in different sectors, and there's a frequency and a scale of impact that's increasing as well. So BCM is essential for all organizations, large and small, public or private. We talked very early on about those 4 essential components. Emergency management, which is around the crisis itself when the incident is underway. Supplier resilience. So I was working with your key suppliers. Well, firstly, understanding who your key suppliers are, working with them to understand potential volatility and impact of uncertainty in their performance and availability and quality, etc. Being very mindful that you may have very important fourth parties as well that they have in turn subcontracted to. Obviously, IT disaster recovery, absolutely critical for every organization, and that's a long-standing discipline, so I would expect that to be something that's in most organizations already well established. A rider I would add to that is we work with organizations where there is an increasing amount of business-led IT. So traditionally, large organizations particularly would have a central IT team. They're responsible for building, deploying, supporting, maintaining the core infrastructure and systems for an organization. Now, many organizations, that a lot of those decisions are devolved, and operational managers around the organization are subscribing to cloud-based services, using the internet, engaging with other providers to develop or deploy or access systems and functionalities with no knowledge of the central IT team. And so therefore you might have key system activity, but that may not be known centrally. So understanding about your key systems, absolutely critical so that inventory and knowing where those key systems are and where they're being run and how they're being deployed. And then business recovery, that's the ultimate goal here. We want to maintain business as usual, minimize the likelihood of disruption, minimize the scale of any disruption, and be as quick as we need to back to business as usual. And then the final point is practice. Things are changing. Your recovery team will change. Your business will change. So it's something that there is definitely a regular cadence of going around that life cycle and making sure you're up to date and confident that you're able to respond and recover. And then finally, last comment on this page is that suggestion I made earlier. Briefer can often be more powerful in this, so a shorter document, so an empowered, motivated, knowledgeable team operating within some clear guidance and ground rules or guardrails, if you like, with some clear objectives, knowing what their goals are. We must have this back within X time, and this within Y time, and this within Z time. And kind of the goal to achieving that you leave to them within some guardrails and overall guidance. So sometimes brevity is a more powerful dimension of business continuity planning. And then just to close us out, the IRM's got a one-day training course on exactly this topic, risk and resilience. You can see there it's coming up in November, so a couple of months away now. You can get more information. You can go directly on the website. There's a link here that you can get straight to it. It is really on the training tab, the training topic center on the IRM website. So if you want to go into more detail then there is that one-day training course that's coming up. And then finally, if you want more information from us, then you can contact the EMEA marketing email address that's on here, and we'll be pleased to provide more information about how you can get access to more best practice insights and etc. That I've given you hopefully an insight into a bit of a window into some of the research and insights and best practice guidance that we can provide on this particular topic. So we are up at time. Yes, there is feedback. If you could provide feedback for me, that would be great. We've got a lot of people on the call, so if you can click the button, we're obviously aiming for 5 stars. 5 stars will be fantastic, because my boss is always interested in how I do, of course. So I'm relying on you guys to help me out here. Hopefully you found the 60 minutes useful, and please, give us feedback. Contact the IRM for that one-day training, and indeed any suggestions or ideas you have for future webinars that we could provide with the IRM. Be interested in hearing that as well. So we're up at time. I'm always very, very conscious that I want to start on time and finish on time. It's 12 o'clock. Thank you very much, everybody. We've had over 300 people dialing into this morning's webinar. So I hope you found it useful. It's been a pleasure running you through this material. So thank you and good morning.